So today what we're going to be learning is converting fractions to decimals, and I have two methods to work with you that will work actually. So method one is to scale up or scale down, which means either you're multiplying or you're dividing, which either you're simplifying or finding an equivalent fraction. So basically what you do is you look to see if the denominator could become 10, a 10, 100, or 1,000. So those numbers or denominators that already have a 10, then you could go ahead and just read it and then write it as a decimal. So this is 1/10. So remember your place value. So this is 0.1. Now remember that if there is nothing here, that means that there is no whole number, so then I would put a 0 there. So make sure that you remember that whenever it's just a fraction, there's going to be a 0 before the decimal. So make sure you remember that. Now, on the second one, we have 300s. So that means I'm going to put 0 because there's no whole number, then the decimal, and then 300s means that this is tens and this is hundreds. So I'm writing the 3 there. So in order for me to fill this empty space, I'm going to put a 0, and that's how I write 300s. So make sure you remember that whenever you're reading it, that you're filling in the place values. So now 2/5, well, there's no 10 on it, but I could convert the 5 into 10. So I'm going to go ahead and multiply by 2, because 5 times 2 is 10. So I'm going to put 10, and 2 times 2 is 4, because remember, whatever you do to the denominator, you have to do to the numerator. So now I read it as 4/10, so I'm going to write it as 0.4. So that is 4/10. Now the next one, you're going to see that you have 1 over 20. Well, 20, I could divide it by 10 to give me 10, but if I divide 1 by, I could divide by 2, not 10. I could divide by 2 to give me 10, but 1, I cannot divide it and to give me an even number. So that means I would need to multiply that by something to give me 100, because that's the next base 10 denominator. So 20 times 5 will give me 100. So that means 1 times 5 will give me 5. So now I read it as 500s. So I'm going to write it as 0.100s is there. Oops. So then I would write it as 500s. Now the next one, you have 1/4. Now 1/4, again, we could make the 4 into 100. So I need to figure out, I need to make it into 100. So that means I'm multiplying this by 25, which means I'm doing the same thing to the denominator. So 4 times 25 is 100. So 1 times 25 is 25. So I'm going to read it as 2500, which is 0.25. And the last one is 13/50. So that means I could turn the 50 into 100. So I'm going to multiply 50 times 2. So 13 times 2 is going to give me 26. So I'm going to read this as 2600s, which is 0.26. So let's see what method 2 is. So this is method 2, and method 2 will work with any fraction to convert into a decimal. Method 1 only works with those numbers that you could convert, or you could find an equivalent fraction with 10, hundreds, or thousands as the denominator. but method 2 would work with any fraction. Now, my strategy is to remember top in, bottom out, which means that the numerator goes inside the box and the denominator is outside. So remember, this bar right here means division. So whenever you see this, that means you're dividing. So let's go ahead and do that. So we have 3/8, so I'm going to go ahead and put 3 inside the box, which is top in, and 8 outside, which is bottom out. Now when you do that, I know 8 cannot go into 3, so that means that's 0 times. So in order for me to continue dividing, that means I need to add a decimal and bring it straight up. And then I'm going to add 3 zeros. Now, you might not use all 3 of them. You might use only 1. You might use only 2. Or you might need to add more. So in this case, I'm just adding 3 zeros just to be ready, but we don't have to add that many. So let's go ahead and divide. So 8 into 3, I know is 0. Now, 8 into 30 is going to go 3 times. I'm going to change the color because you can't see it. So 8 into 30 is 3 times, which is 24. I'm subtracting that. So 30 minus 24 is 6. Remember, you ignore the decimal once you bring it up. Then bring the 0 down. 8 into 60 is going to go in 7 times. So 8 times 7 is 56. You're going to subtract that, which is 4. Remainder is 4. Bring down the 0. So 8 into 40 is 5 times. So 8 times 5 is 40. So your remainder is 0. So in this case, method 2 will always work for everything. Now 3/8 is equivalent to 0.375 as a decimal. So here's my answer. So make sure you understand that whenever you're trying to convert a fraction to a decimal, division will always work. So now it's time for you to try it. So what I suggest you do is go ahead and pause the video. That way you could go and practice these converting fractions into decimals, and then come back to the video to see if you did it correctly. So go ahead and do that now. Okay, hopefully you were able to try it. So here are your answers, and the first one, your answer should have been 0.875. I went ahead and divided that because I couldn't find an equivalent fraction and I couldn't just read it. For the second one, I just read it and wrote it as a decimal, so 6/10 would be 0.6. And then the last one, I went ahead and scaled up in order to find that it was 75/100. So one thing that I want you to remember is that these are common fractions and decimal conversions. So if you could start memorizing those, that would be awesome, and it would help you in the long run. So know that 7/8 is 875. 6/10, you just write the 6 after the decimal, or any numerator after the decimal, and 3/4 is 75/100. Think of fourths as quarters. So if you have 3/4, that's 75 cents. If I had 2/4, that would be 50 cents. And if I had 1/4, that would be 25 cents. So that helps you when you think of it as money. So go to your practice, which is the Google Slides, and make sure you complete all the slides, read the directions on them, and make sure that you are going through all the slides and working through them. So if you have any questions, email me and I'll help you out.